the subject, and it's an overview, so I'm going to talk about a lot of different things. And what I want you to gather from it is that there is a lot, and then we'll go through it through the semester. So it's just to introduce you. These presentations are all online, and they are on my website, which is, I'll give you also on the Facebook group. So here, if you go to Interaction Design, you have all the presentations, and you have even further information about interaction media design. But I'll put this URL onto the website so that you can access it directly. So I will explain a little bit different things. And again, here there is a new content that comes from the conferences I've been to over the last year. Right, so I want to give you first some basic examples of interaction design. And I want you to think about it, because we face a lot of interactions, but not many of these interactions are properly designed. Do you recognize this?
Yes.
Cheer up, guys. It's chill out. I can hear the hammering starting. I hope it's not going to go into the pneumatic drilling, because as I said, if there's pneumatic drilling, I'm stopping. So we have here a control panel for the door. We have an indicator to tell us that the door is locked. We have a button to close the door. We have the button to open the door, and we have a button with the L. Next to it, there is a very comprehensive manual and user instructions to tell you how to operate this control panel. Can anyone tell me where the problem is?
I imagine it's not like concise and short enough, the instructions, I guess.
That's one thing, yeah, that's one thing. Any other suggestion? Well, is there any usage for a door closed but not locked? Is there any case where you are in the toilets, that you close the door but you don't lock the door? Yes or no? Here we are. So that means there is an extra step which need not to be there. It should be when you close the thing, it's automatically locked, and when you open, it automatically unlock. The philosophy behind it, if you want, the approach that the designer of this had, or should I say the engineer, is that they thought you want to close the door, lock the door, because if you open the door, it will open if you don't lock it. So because you lock the door, it won't open. But actually, it wasn't implemented like this. It was implemented that you close the door. If you don't lock, it's not locked. So you have to lock it. But if you don't press L to unlock, you press open, and that automatically unlock. So the case where it prevents you from accidentally opening the door is not happening. But the case where you close the door and you forget to lock happens all the time. And on average, every 2 or 3 times I go on the train with a system like this, I end up opening the door and there's someone inside. Luckily, so far, I never had someone sitting on the throne, but this is a seriously bad design, because the consequences here are not, there's no danger, but they are they're almost traumatic. You don't want to be, doing what you are doing in the toilet and then someone sees you. It's a bit dodgy. So that means it's badly designed. It might work, but it's badly designed. Right, this is another example. This is, if you want, is the periphery of interaction design, but it's always the same issue. What's the problem here?
They don't specify, well, because like below that it says national and international, but at the top it only says national.
Yeah, so you have misleading labeling. And that is a problem, because a lot of time you have, so for those of you who remember Windows computers, to shut down the computer you had to press on the start button. Now it changed to the home button, but in the old days it said start on that button. And you're like, why should I press on start to shut down the computer. But that's the way it was mislabeled. And here again, why should you, and these are just examples I take from my everyday life. I'm not taking these from any research lab. And that's the kind of thing I want you guys to do. From now on, when you see something that's difficult to use, when you see something you're struggling with, take a picture and then we'll discuss it. Put it on the Facebook group and let's discuss it, okay? So here it says national rail ticket, but in fact they sell both national and international rail tickets. So go and figure out who came up with this. It's misleading. Yeah, that's the explanation. So here's another one which I think is also a bit strange. This is, can you see what this is?
There's like 3 handles.
Well, it says what it is. It's a coffee maker. But the problem is that you have, you make the coffee and then you turn it around when the coffee has brewed for the coffee to drop through. So you put the coffee, the hot water here, you put the coffee here, and then you rotate to get the coffee ready. But you know what the problem is? That's how you rotate when you want, but you always end up burning your hand because there's always, for some reason, it gets messy and you don't know how to hold it because it's a bit of a bizarre thing. So here is the physical thing that's a bit bizarre. Now this. Do you have any example here? That's something you're going to do actually for today. This is what you call user's design. And there's a lot of things that you as a user you do to change and modify a product or device so that it suits you better. Most cases you make little adjustments or you readapt or you reinterpret the usage of it. Here's a very simple example. That was meant to be an amenity pouch for business class traveler on the plane. Turns out it's very convenient for my markers and my with my little eraser for the board. So that's perfect for me. But it's not, that wasn't designed for this, but it turns out it's perfect for that. So it's a complete reinterpretation of what it is designed for. Sometimes you make little adjustments, like you tape something on it, like you change the layout, like you add things, etc. And what I want you to do as well is think about it in terms of what you have at home and how you modify things to get them to suit you better and to work better for you. Okay? Any questions so far? Anyone has any suggestion of anything they've done that's a bit like that? Liam, Liam W, what did you change? You were nodding like this. Did you change anything? No? You were just nodding. I was acknowledging. Right. That's a picture from the pub in the Five Swans, just across the road there. And what's interesting about this is that this is a very different view on the pub. So if you're familiar with that pub, or if you're familiar with any pub or cafe or anything, there's the customer-facing side, where everything is neat and everything is smooth and organized to maximize purchase opportunities and to hopefully facilitate the delivery of a service, in this case the delivery of a drink or something. But on the other side, it's a very different system, and in this case it's a system that deals with how to optimize the delivery of all the containers for different drinks, how to maximize the availability of different means to deliver the drinks that customers will order. And on the other side, you have also, apart from the containers, you have also extra food, you have also extra choice. So it's a very different perspective on the same thing. This is the same bar, it's one bar, one counter to be very specific. But there's one side for the staff and there's one side for the customer. And this is again another issue in interaction design. You have whatever system, whatever service, whatever application on one hand, on one side of the system, and on the other side you have the user and you have an interface for people to use your system in a way that's easy and intuitive. Yeah? Any questions? Are you all following? Shall I speed up? Shall I slow down? Yeah. Are you all breathing regularly? Are you on there? Okay, great. Here's another example. So can someone tell me what the problem is with this example? And for your information, this is a wasp.
It could block the pedal, potentially, if, like, you go...
No, that's a lock. And there's a wasp just where you have the slot for the key. No? Anyone? No suggestion? It's, what I call the wasp syndrome is that you might have, it's like when you have in some computers, it's like saying, are you sure you want to cancel the operation? And then it says, be warned that if you cancel, all what you've done will be deleted and lost. And then you don't know what's going to be deleted and what's going to be lost. So it's a kind of an interface where the interaction, so pressing a button or something might have catastrophic problem. And it becomes something where you don't want to use it. So here, it's perfectly working, but the risk of getting bitten by the wasp is stung by the wasp is so great that you're not going to touch it. And it's the same with the software. You could have something that works perfectly well, but the prompt is so misleading that you don't want to press the button because you don't know what's going to happen. So here again, you have to make sure you avoid these kind of problems where the user feel like there's going to be a catastrophic problem if they press the button. These are the good old days. These are the days where things were properly designed. And let me explain why. If you wanted to listen to frequency modulated radio, aka FM, you had a dial button here, and you knew that turning this will allow you to scan through the spectrum of the frequency modulated radios, and you could listen to the rates in the megahertz, I can't remember the frequency. So you could listen to different stations. So not only you had this dial that you could turn around, but you could see there was an indicator, which is here in the FM, that will move up and down to tell you where were you in the spectrum. And the spectrum is from 87.5 megahertz to 104 megahertz. So you could see that moving while you turned that, and you could also hear the music when you were tuned into the radio. So you had physical manipulation, which is a rotation by the hand. You had visual feedback, which is the indicator on the FM tuner, showing you where it was in relation to the spectrum from 87.5 to 104. And you could hear the music when you were tuned. 3 channels, 3 modalities of interaction to give you the same message. Wonderful. Plus you had, if you wanted to change the treble and the bass, as in the low pitch and the high pitch sound, that's the only thing you had. You didn't have a tuner or any of those atmosphere settings. You had again a dial button here that you could turn around to set up your low pitch and high pitch sounds. That was to turn on and off. You could save in memory 1, 2, oh no, these were the frequencies. So you could choose the frequency you wanted to listen to. And then anything with frequency modulation, you turn this dial, and anything else to do with other length waves of the radio, you turn this dial. It was perfect because it was tangible, it was physical, and it was laid out in front of you. There was no guesswork to do. Yeah? But if I show this to you guys, you have no clue how to use that. Because there's been a complete change in paradigm, a complete change in the culture that we are familiar with and the technology that we're familiar with. You guys are digital natives. You were born with Facebook and with Google and all that. I wasn't. So my approach to technology and my approach to products is very different. And that's why for this type of generation differences, the non-digital native and the digital native, we learn so much about how to use technology just by looking at you guys. You have no idea how much I'm learning from my students because we weren't born with that. In my days, we didn't have social chat things and all that. It wasn't there. It just didn't happen. So, what is interaction design? Now I've shown you little examples, and I could show you many more examples, but we'll start and we'll come back and we'll start and we'll come back. That's the whole thing. Well, it's a lot of things, so it's a lot of disciplines, and it's trying to create a way for people to use the system. And the system can be a mobile phone, can be a game, can be a website, can be an app, can be tablets, etc., etc. And it's taking into account various metrics and criteria. And this part is important because this part relates to the fact that it's a design discipline. That means it's not just about creating something, but also creating something with the end user in mind. And that's one of the key feature of design, is that there is an end user in mind. So you have to use some metrics, some ways of measuring, and some criteria to decide if it's good or bad. For example, you say, well, a person should be able to dial a number within half a minute. That means when they have their mobile phone, they should be able to do this, to open, to unlock, and to dial within half a minute. So that's your metric. And your criteria is to dial, the metric is time, and the criteria is to achieve a phone call in that time. You could also say, for example, well, I want to have a mobile phone which is designed in such a way that if you have to make an emergency phone call, it takes only 2 buttons to dial the emergency services. So again, your metric here is not time, it's the number of buttons, and the criteria is that you are able to call the emergency services, etc., etc., etc. Because you need to check that it works. Because you're going to come up with something new. Who tells anyone that it works? You need to test it. That's one of the key things about interaction design, is you try and test things. So it's a combination of engineering. You have to make the thing. It should be physical, or it should be an app, or it should be it's engineered, it's built for a purpose. Science, because you have to think about, does it make sense? Does it work together? Is there, how does it, is it usable? And design discipline, you have to give it visual appearance, you have to give it physical material, you have to design the embodiment of your system, and finally a bit of flair, where you have to think about the whole thing and see if it works or not. Does it make sense so far? Have I got anyone starting to think, oh my God, what am I doing here? Don't worry. We'll repeat this a few times. Huh? So I'm giving you a first time and then repeat it a few times. So that's the slide that I've added out of a conference again that happened in 2016. So what's interaction? It's, according to this very interesting professor from Japan, it's information sharing. So an interaction is about sharing information between the user and the system. And it's not just any information, because the radio receiving is information sharing. You listen to the radio, you specify the channel you want to listen to, and then you keep listening to the radio. So there is sharing in one direction mostly, it's very little on the other way. Well, it's a bit of a balanced interaction sharing, as in back and forth from the user and the system. It's about what are your intention, what are your understanding, and what do you request. That's the thing you're going to communicate to the system. You remember that these slides are online, so you can see them as of, and now you're going to have a YouTube video as well. And the second thing, you're sharing information with the system to complete a purposeful task, to fulfill a certain intent, to improve your understanding, or to address a request. So, to put it simply, I have a radio receiver on my mobile phone. I express via information sharing what I intend to do. I want to listen to FM radio. And then what I get ways of completing the task to get to the information, to get to the listening of the FM radio. And then when I got there, I can hear the FM radio playing, and I can hear the music. Okay? So it's a bit theoretical, but don't worry. We'll come back to it. I'm pushing a lot, but we'll come back to it. So if you feel it's a bit heavy, don't worry, because we'll come back to it. After all, it's only your first lesson, and we have time to get through this. So, what kind of things do you need to deliver interaction design? Well, you need to be able to build things. So if you're building, let's say, an information kiosk for a train station, you need to be able to build that. You need to be able to handle technology that goes into it. You need to be able to program some software to work onto the system that you're designing. You need to make sure that it's comfortable, so you need to know a little bit about ergonomics. You need to know about human perception, so it needs to be of a certain size. It needs, if it's a text that's displayed on a computer screen, you need to make sure there is a certain contrast, etc., etc. Then you need also some design, graphics, product design, industrial design. How are you going to manufacture it? What shape is the kiosk going to have? What look is the kiosk going to have? What font are you going to use in your screen, etc., etc., etc. Then you need to think of what content you're going to have. So you're going to show what information you're going to show the user. What media you're going to use. It's going to be music, it's going to be text, it's going to be color, animations, etc. What's the feel and look it's going to have? And very importantly nowadays, because that's where we are, what experience is the user going to have of it? How is the user going to experience what you've designed? Is it going to be a positive experience? Are they going to be bored? Are they going to use it for too long? Like recently, I don't know if you've read it in the news, but New York City just launched a service of Wi-Fi and internet browsing terminals in the city. So they have like 2,000, 4,000 of them over the whole of Manhattan in particular. They're big like this, they're very nice, very nicely designed, and you have two screens for advertisement, and in the front there's a small screen, and there's a keyboard for you to use. Problem is that two things that happen out of it. First, people were listening to music, so they put it on a music website and let it play music all the time, so other people couldn't use it. And more problematically, some people start downloading pornography and watching pornography right in a public place, which was another problem. So they had to redesign. They are now redesigning their system because they got a problem with the content. Everything else worked well. They're very successful. I don't know anyone who's been to New York recently. Well, they're everywhere in downtown Manhattan. But the problem is that the content, people have changed the content to something else. And that's, again, an issue of interaction design. It's not a problem of the technology or the engineering. It's a problem that no one foresaw that the user were going to be abusing the thing. Yeah, for example, for the music play, it was mostly the homeless that would play music because I wanted to listen to good music. So those kiosks would be surrounded by homeless people who are just sitting there listening to music. And obviously, if you're walking around and you see a group of homeless people sitting there, you're not going to go say, "Excuse me, I want to use that." So it defeats the purpose of an easily accessible information console for tourists. And as the designer of the thing said, it was meant originally to be just for quick queries about, for example, where's the museum or where's the next bus, etc. And it turned into a very different usage. Anyone can think of a technology that was used completely different.
I was just gonna ask a question about that. Like, you know about like how people like downloading like illegal stuff with the Wi-Fi. Could they not just like put like one of those filters you have, like?
Yeah, but I mean, they first had to realize what was going on, and then now they've turned them off, and they're going to reprogram them so you can't have adult and other restricted content. Anyone knows any technology that was completely changed to something else?
In the military, they've introduced like the usage of like console controls and that sort of thing for operating like drones and like remote like control of vehicles and that sort of thing. So that's a repurpose of like a technology which a company which make like games. So I mean,
I see. Yeah. But I mean, that's slightly different. But one good example of this, that's a repurposing of a technology. Here it's a complete reusage. SMS. It was initially used. It was extra bandwidth available in the GSM signal, and it was used by engineers to check that the network worked, so they could send very short messages to see if it worked, and they could communicate like that over the GSM signal. And then it turned out that it was very successful, and there's gazillions of text messages that are sent every day. Of course, now you being digital natives, you've moved to online messaging, But my days we did a lot of texting. Right, so that's an example, and I'll show you a video after we've had the break. So that's an example of the thing that I do. This is a baby monitor, and the shape is designed in such a way as to be an abstract form, which is of a certain quality so that you can accept the device in your lounge. So because you're going to have this in your lounge all the time, those baby monitors with bright colors and all that, they look very tacky. This looks a bit more interesting to have. And there are different features in the device that change to indicate what's going on with the baby. But I'll show you the video in a minute. Oh, and by the way, for the purpose of the video that I'm making, the video about this is available on my YouTube channel. I have to sell myself. Right. I'm going to show you this, and there is a reason why I'm showing you this. Don't worry, it's beyond your level. But what I want you to understand from this is the kind of research that I do a lot of, is to try to understand the role of the user, whatever device you design, and whatever content or target output or input you have. So in this case, for example, if you think about it this way, you have the user, you have the dashboard of a car, and then the control of the car, that's it. So the dashboard sits between you and the car, and you have to rely on the dashboard to understand what's going on and also to control how the car is driven. And that's an interface. Another example, I'm here and Tom is here, and I want to call Tom, and my mobile phone stands in the middle. So the mobile phone is my interface with Tom. So what I do on the mobile phone has an effect on how I deal with Tom. So if I could call him, I could text him, I could send him a picture, etc., etc., etc. And that's the relationship between the user, the technology via the interface, and the content that's beyond, is all of that is interaction design. So if I'll show you. It's a shame we don't have many more. Well, I'm pressing on instead of pressing off. See what I mean? It's a shame we don't have a few whiteboards. So if you think about it like this, I have only red pen. So if you have a user here, that's like a picture of a human. So if you have a user here, and then you have your user your interfaces, so whatever interface you're designing, then you have some information and information and communication technology. I can't even spell it. So ICT here. And for example, you have some content here. So of course, like this, it looks like, yeah, what does it mean? So here, it's the user. Here is the touch screen, for example. That's the mobile phone. And that's, for example, what you're gonna have, Google Earth. So yeah, Google Earth. So that's an app. Yeah? That's the device. That's the interface. And that's the user. Yeah? Okay. The good old days. And you can still see that in classical laptops with keyboards and desktop with keyboards and all that. We always thought there was a kind of a linear relationship going like this. Anyone play Pokemon Go at the moment? You don't see this linear relationship. You're completely immersed into trying to catch the monsters. They're called monsters? Yeah, Pokemon monster, of course. And you are then, you're much more into that. And then you're also very, very concerned about your score and your ranking. So You don't even see that, and you don't really see that apart from the ranking that you have, because what you're really concerned is when you see a monster, you're like trying to catch it with your Pokeball, whatever they call it. So it changes a lot. And you, as a designer, you are the one who play a role in transforming this relationship. How many of you have Apple telephones, mobile phones, Apple iPhone, whatever they call it, i600, iPhone 6? Yeah, they're more expensive, lower technology, complete closed-up ecosystem where you're locked in by Apple to buy Apple product and Apple agreed product and all that. Much more expensive than the other ones, but you're still doing it. Why? Because of the user experience you get out of it. Because it becomes a fashionable product. So it's a completely different reason, but it's still a very important reason why it's working. Apple products they've completely changed the philosophy of the company. And by the way, I have no connection with Apple. I'm not against Apple or for Apple. I'm just saying things for the lecture. I have to say all this and that. Get a lawyer from Apple calling me. They become a trend. And if you get yourself into a trend, you can then ignore the basics of interaction design and impose your own rule. A simple example, the QWERTY keyboard that you have in your laptop and desktops was actually invented for the typewriter, and it was invented to slow down the typist. So the most frequently used keys are the furthest apart possible, so that you're traveling around, because in the old days, each letter was on a little hammer on the typewriter, which will hit the paper and come back. So if you had two, and I saw it because my father used to have a typewriter, if you type too fast, they will hit each other and it will clog the whole thing. So they put the letter far apart, so you can type, and then it comes back, and then by the time you move your finger, the fingers come back and you can type the next letter. So this keyboard, as we are using, is actually designed to slow you down. And yet, they've come up with better design, more effective design for keyboard, but we're not using them because of convention. And that's a big problem. I was reading an article earlier about medical apps. There's someone who's trying to create an expert system to do the work of the GP. So instead of going to your GP and wasting your time trying to find out what your illness is, you'll go to your GP to talk about how you are and how you feel. And then the questions are preloaded by a phone app, and they already have a pre-diagnosis of what your problem is. And then you spend more time talking about yourself than answering stupid questions, sometimes completely irrelevant to your condition. Where's the problem there? That's not the way the doctors work. Good example, in the late 19th century, in Austria, in Vienna, someone came up with the realization that if the doctors wash their hands between each patient, it will improve hygiene. So they ran a trial, and they asked their medics, it was in 1880 or something, so a long time ago. They had to wash their hands each time they went from one patient to the other. It was in the pediatry ward. What they discovered is that infant death went from 10% to 1%. So there was a very clear benefit for the doctor to keep themselves clean between patients, to wash their hands so that they don't carry bacteria or disease across patients. Problem, it wasn't the practice. Doctors were not in the habit of cleaning their hands. So after the trial finished, it was completely abandoned because no one wanted to change their way of living and doing things. So here again, you can have a very good design that's not adopted because you're asking your user to change something that they're not willing to change. Or you can have a design that's not so good, but it's part of the convention, or it's part of some social values. So having this product make you belong to a certain social group, yeah?
So is it basically like for a mainstream consumer, they don't even think about the technicalities of it anymore. They just get it because it's fashionable. It's like for an iPhone.
Yeah, you have cases like that, yeah. But that's what I want to say. So we carry on, we go back. Oh, we can do it like this. Carry on with the presentation. So we've done, we have to do 3 hours, and it's 1 hour and a half. Okay, we're going to stop in a minute. for a little break. And I can see my video. So we'll stop and have a break, and then we'll carry on afterwards. Any questions so far?